and welcome to another episode of Mike and Dave's Hi-Fi Riff. I'm Mike Evans.
And I'm David Price.
And this week we have a very, very special episode of, in fact, a red-hot episode of Mike and Dave's Hi-Fi Riff, because...
I see what you did there, Mike.
We're going to be talking about...
this.
Have I gone back in time?
Yes, you have, Mike. You've gone back to 1984, and this is the Musical Fidelity A1. So, would you like to feel my heatsink? Don't touch mine.
I've had previous with these. Frying eggs when your frying pan breaks down and all that stuff.
Yes, they're effectively a space heater that also works as a hi-fi amplifier. I think that's probably the best description.
This is a fascinating product, actually, isn't it? And it deserves its place in hi-fi history because it was the first affordable, mass-produced Class A amplifier, really, wasn't it? It was. I remember selling these in the 90s, and they were incredibly popular.
Yeah.
Because they have a very beguiling sound quality to them.
Yes, when they were working.
Well, you say that this isn't quite a stock one, is it? You've had this refurbed, haven't you?
Yes, it's had a lot of new capacitors and other components fitted. Basically, because it's like a kind of oven that bakes its own components.
Yes.
I think that's fair to say. So it is, as you say, it's an iconic Class A integrated amplifier from the 1980s, and I think for so many audiophiles it was their introduction to kind of exotic high-end hi-fi, but at a quite affordable price. It was £200 in 1984 when it came out. And it has it's a striking amplifier in so many ways and for so many reasons. To quote Musical Fidelity's founder, Antony Michaelson, he called it a felicitous combination. And what he meant by that is that it had the electronic circuit design of Tim de Paravicini, who was famous for EAR and so much kind of professional valve amplifier circuit design and consultancy, with a striking, I think it's striking, very 80s sort of modernist, brutalist almost, industrial design by Kenneth Grange at Pentagram. And I think it's one of the few amplifiers that had the physical design, the casework done by a kind of outside design agency. And from what I remember speaking to Antony many years ago, that it was not cheap to get that design work done.
No. Can you imagine the phone call as well? Hello Kenneth, we've got a small amplifier, it's only so big, integrated, but we need you to put the biggest heat sink you possibly can in it because it's going to be red hot all of the time. And maybe if you can have it so that there's a runoff for the vegetable oil when we're cooking our breakfasts, then that would be really handy as well.
That's right, a kind of a sort of griddle attachment
exactly,
or something.
Yes, it's a modern day George Foreman.
Yeah. So I mean, it is a fascinating product to me, and I spoke to Tim de Paravicini shortly before he died a while back, and he was telling me the process of development of the A1, and for Tim it was an attempt to prove a point. So he's a huge valve fan. And he wanted it to sort of show the world that you could get some kind of special sound quality from transistors too. So maybe many of us are solid state users and we think that's a bit of a far out viewpoint. But Tim was almost religiously pro valve in so many ways. And he actually came up with the idea of this amplifier, as he told me, in his head. And then he made an early prototype up, which he put in a biscuit tin. And he told me that he ran that prototype for 2 years solidly, powered up all the time, and kept taking measurements of the external temperature of the aforementioned biscuit tin, so when the casework for the A1 was designed, the object was to get the temperatures down to a mere 65 degrees centigrade.
Lower than the temperature of the sun.
Just about, yeah. If you kind of think about how hot a jet engine exhaust is, and sort of go up a little bit, that's basically how hot this runs. But yeah, the idea was to get it at a constant 65 degrees centigrade. Tim was absolutely adamant that this was the case, that it never went above 65 degrees. And there was some debate after that somehow some of the ones that ended up being manufactured seemed to run hotter. And that was, to put it diplomatically, a controversial subject, but
it was. We probably shouldn't really delve into that now. Similar things were said about the B1, which was its sort of its own rival product.
Yeah, well, I think
Class
that they had some kind of reliability problems, I think is fair to say, and that's partly I think because it was absolutely ramming the circuit up to the very maximum.
Yes.
And if you had any component failures or components just out of spec, and of course that can happen to any manufacturer, then basically there was nowhere to hide with this amplifier.
No, sure. And of course, being pretty much pure Class A here, it wasn't the most powerful amplifier in the world, but it has had, however you want to frame it, a really sweet sound quality.
Yeah.
Really smooth. Does so many things incredibly well. So, and obviously, and I'm sure we'll probably mention this in a minute, it did have its competition. But for me, maybe it's Square. Well, the one that probably outsold it the most was probably the Name Nate, the original Name Nate one, which was totally the opposite. Super fast, super dynamic. In your face.
Yeah.
Have some of me, like a little sort of terrier at your ankles.
Yeah.
And this was just, hey man, chill. Let's go and smoke a cigar and have some port and sit in the comfy chair kind of amplifier, which was a really nice contrast.
Yeah.
Actually, you needed both.
Yeah.
Because I would say, and this is my own personal humble opinion, if you had that kind of there was music which suited the Nate and there was music which suited the A1.
Yeah.
A1, and you can work out, it doesn't take rocket science, does it?
Yeah.
But if you were playing classical, if you were playing jazz, if you were playing, mellow music, great. But if you were
Soul,
playing exactly,
kind of,
fantastic.
Yeah.
But if you had very dynamic recordings, rock and like Kraftwerk and electronic music with fast transients
and strong bass.
Really deep bass and fast and high dynamics, then it was the Nate all the way.
Yeah.
But there's a huge place for this, and I think one of the reasons why Antony Michaelson liked this little amplifier so much was because he could really hear some of that sound signature from some of those enormous Class A amplifiers which they did in that era. Was it the P370 or something like that, or 470?
Yeah.
Which was this huge, great thing, which was a proper two-man lift.
Yeah.
Just incredible. But this had part of that. This had part of that in it.
Yes, this was a kind of high-end, high-power Class A amplifier that sort of shrunk in the washing machine, basically.
Yes.
It's still pretty heavy. It weighs, I don't know, well above 10 kilograms, I would say, and it feels like a sort of solid ingot of aluminium.
It does.
There's a pretty, there's a lot of stuff in it, and
he wanted it to be functional as well, so it's got plenty of inputs.
Yeah.
The Nate had 2, I think, and a phono, and that was it. But this had sort of 4 or 5, didn't it?
It's got 5 inputs. It's got a phono, CD, tuner, auxiliary, and tape monitor. I think tape input. Tape.
Just you clicking the dial there really brings back memories. It's a real that's a real Musical Fidelity sort of sound, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
Firm click to move into place between 2, and a nicely balanced volume pot.
Yeah.
Really cool.
Absolutely,
and you had to turn it on and wait for a bit for it to warm up before you could use it, which didn't take long.
No, about 5 nanoseconds normally. But it was, it was a very interesting design, not just for its its internals, but the industrial design is, I think, is beautiful in its way, it had far more inputs than were usual at the time in the mid-80s, but it was very simple to use and very elegant. Round the back there's a MMMC phono selector there.
Yes.
Banana speaker outputs there, sockets there. Just hold that up to the camera. So, but it was even, quite pretty from behind, wasn't it? Very, very sort of clean to look at.
Yeah.
And a really nice piece of design when you think that most British amplifiers were actually not too far away from the aforementioned biscuit tin.
I'm going to pick your brains on this because I think kind of what we're saying in this review is this is a lovely retro amplifier to own.
Yeah.
And in fact, this is I think some second-hand amps particularly are really coming into their own from an affordability point of view. Nice eBay purchases, and we've talked about things like the Exposure 10, and we just mentioned the Nate and Miss TMA3,
NVA
AP30, that kind of, so it's classic beautiful amplifiers.
Yeah, Mission Cyrus 2 as well. It's a big seller, wasn't it?
And there's some bargains to be had on eBay. But I'm picking your brains here because what I was going to ask you, well, two things actually. First of all, how much would something like that be worth on eBay? And secondly, would you buy it knowing that they do tend to have a habit of baking their own components, as you put it?
So, I mean, firstly, to be fair, if you buy any mid-80s amplifier, the chances are that it will need to have, replacement capacitors and a rebias and basically a service. And that really happens with pretty much any amplifier of that age. But the difference between those and the A1 is that the service needed to happen a lot sooner, very often within the warranty period. It had real problems with heat dissipation, and this particular one here, you can see it on the side panels here. The later ones had perforations in the side panels.
They did.
To keep to help the flow of air. Yes. Heaven only knows why Musical Fidelity thought they didn't need to put these in the first ones. Is
maybe they're all a bit cold in the factory.
Yeah, maybe they were in Siberia when they were testing it or something. But yes, 80s amplifiers of that period weren't exactly models of reliability, I think. But I think this was on the edge of what many people thought acceptable, and it's kind of what I liked about the 80s was that you could get away with it. That you had extreme products at a relatively affordable price, and people just did it because they could.
Yes.
And these days, hi-fi is so much more sort of sensible shoes and carefully done and risk averse, isn't it?
Yes.
I would say if you do buy one, it's absolutely essential to get it serviced properly. We'll put a link in the footer of this video for a great place to get this serviced. And it basically needs, it will need a lot of...
So you need to put that into your purchase price from eBay, really. We need to factor that in. So what if I'm going to buy, let's say not your mint one here, which has all been done. If I want to buy one with... don't worry about that. How much am I looking at to
Yeah, I mean, if a non-runner is 150 quid,
sure,
which is crazily cheap for what it is.
Sure.
A half decent one is about 300. 4 to 5 for a really good one that's been serviced.
Yes.
But if you think that that's so little money for the quality of the sound and the distinctiveness of the sound relative to what else you can get, you can sort of pick up a sort of very middling 2-year-old amp from some sort of relatively mediocre manufacturer for that money. So it's a huge value, I think.
Yeah.
The only thing I would say is that you need to use it with efficient loudspeakers.
You really do. Yeah. In fact, to be fair, Musical Fidelity made some really cool. There's a reference twos and things like that. Loudspeakers back in the sort of late 90s, I suppose, mid to late 90s, and they were easy to drive and actually sounded pretty damn good with the A1.
Yeah. Well, this has only got 20 watts RMS per channel.
Yes.
Into 8 ohms. I dread to think what it is into 4, but it's probably not much more.
No.
It's not a kind of load driving amplifier.
No, if you had a really hard to drive pair of headphones, it would probably struggle.
Yeah.
Interesting. I met. It's a fascinating parallel here because I only met Antony Michaelson, when this was his era, once, and he was a really very interesting guy, really nice guy, very much liked his company, and he liked his cars as much as he liked his
Maseratis.
And he used to, and when I met him, he must have spent an hour moaning about the unreliability of his Italian Maserati sports car.
Yeah.
And you think, well, there's sort of something to be said here. There's a parallel to be drawn, with some of the, slightly similar amplifiers. So for me, this is a Maserati.
Yes.
You're not always sure it's going to fire up when you press the button. But when it does, it's sweet as a nut, and also it looks pretty damn cool as well.
Yeah.
So there we are, the Maserati of the hi-fi world.
Well, it's certainly no Honda of the hi-fi world, that's for sure.
No, that was left to a few other manufacturers.
Yeah.
We could name it another day.
Indeed.
So.
But I mean, it's once it's sorted out, once it's serviced, it's a reasonably sensible proposition. I mean, I've had.
You sure?
I am actually. I mean, one of the issues is that the components inside it in the 80s, I think, were less good. The quality was less good than you get now, and they were more prone to failure and all the rest of it.
Interesting.
I'm still not saying it's it's the world's most reliable amplifier, but it's perfectly good to use on a regular basis. And one great speaker that I love using with this amplifier, it matches it beautifully, is a Cambridge Audio Aero 60, and it's a Frostander, which I think it's no longer available, but it was about £700 or £800, and it's got a very, very sweet and open sound. Uses BMRs, balance mode radiators, and this thing drives it beautifully. Because
they'll be very efficient.
Exactly that. Yeah. So. Any efficient speaker works well with this.
eBay will be lighting up now.
I know.
Won't it, for these products.
Exactly.
I'm going to introduce something here. We're going to talk about the Mike and Dave Retro Riffometer.
Yep.
So in terms of, because I'd like to think we can do a few retro products in our little YouTube channel here. So in our Retro Riffometer, what are you going to give it?
So, that's a really difficult question. So, especially, it's like, what would you give a Name Nate, original Name Nate? Is it 10?
I know what
you give. You've got one.
I'd give it 11.
Yeah, exactly.
Another day.
So you could give it 11 or 1, depending on what you're wanting to use it for. And this is actually another kind of 11 or 1 type product. I mean, I just think. For its combination of the wonderful industrial design, the fantastic circuitry inside, the electronic design, and the ambition of Tim de Paravicini, and of course, Antony Michaelson's vision as well to bring all of that together. I think it's got to be a 10. Actually, on the Retro Riffometer.
Okay.
Just because it is what it is. It's a sort of Sierra Cosworth or something of its generation. It's not for everyone, and but what it does very well.
And it's an interesting point, because I think if we were back in the days when I used to retail these, I'd have probably given it a 4, because they weren't the most reliable products. They were a bit of a pain.
Yeah,
they're
hard
a bit
to
niche
match
market,
as well. Yeah,
very difficult.
Especially in the 80s when most speakers were far less
hugely inefficient.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But it's something which has grown on me over time. Now I'm going to be honest here. It's still not quite my thing. It's okay, and maybe I've given the game away by saying about the Nate, which I loved and I still own one. So not quite my thing, but look, it's matured with age. It's no longer a 5. It's going to be an 8 from me, which is pretty good, I think. And maybe in a couple of years' time, who knows? It can only go up from there.
Indeed.
So there we are. So look, a fascinating episode there of Mike and Dave's Hi-Fi Riff. And thank you very much indeed for watching. And we'll see you at the next one. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.